Hey guys, Otaku here. Welcome back to another one of these like little debate videos, I guess. So I recently did a Banlist Prediction video over on the channel. If you haven't seen it, feel free to go check it out. And in that video, I predicted that Dimension Shifter is going to get banned. Realistically, it's probably going to get put to semi-limit or limit if it even gets touched at all. I personally just think that it needs to get banned, and there's a lot of it's just a problem card. And in the comments, I had, Dimension Shifter was kind of the topic of the comment section for sure. And some people asked, why do I think Dimension Shifter is going to and needs to be banned? And the simple fact is it's just a very unfun and very strong card. And that's not to say like every unfun or every strong card needs to get banned, but it's just the manner in which it is strong and why it is played so much. So for those who don't know what the effect of Dimension Shifter is, and I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you probably do, but just in case, basically on either turn, if you have no cards in your graveyard, you can send it from your hand to the graveyard, and until the end of the next turn, every card that would get sent to the graveyard gets banished instead. So it's like a Macrocosmos or a Kashtira Riseheart, but it lasts for 2 turns. That doesn't sound like that bad at first glance because, Kashtira Riseheart and Macrocosmos, they do that as long as they're on the board. But see, that's the problem. They do it as long as they're on the board, meaning the moment they leave the board via Kaiju, Harpy's Feather Duster, Cosmic Cyclone, etc., depending on which one's on the board, then their effect is no longer valid. Dimension Shifter can be activated from the hand, which means instantly there's very little interaction. It can be activated at draw phase turn 1, even if it's not your turn. So it could be your opponent's draw phase, turn 1 of the duel, and you can activate this from your hand, basically saying, fuck you, if they're playing a deck that needs their graveyard. And the card, because again, very little interaction since it's being activated from the hand, there's very few counters to the card. One could argue, it can be negated by Omni-Negates like Baron or Therion Regulus, but if they're not on the board turn 1, then they're not able to stop it. And so the only real cards to stop this card from existing is Called by the Grave and Crossout Designator. But as I mentioned in the Banlist Prediction video, if you're running Crossout Designator to counter this card, that means you yourself are running it. And if you're trying to get rid of it, that means you don't want to see it played. So why are you running it in general? You could also technically activate like Artifact Lancia, but I'm pretty sure that can only be activated on your opponent's turn. But also the problem here with Dimension Shifter is it lasts 2 turns, whereas Lancia only stops 1 turn. And that's really the big problem here, is that Dimension Shifter lasts 2 whole turns. And I think and it lasts 2 turns and it has 0 interaction, or very little interaction at that. And it just makes very problematic situations. For one, Dimension Shifter alone has been defining the meta since Kashtira really became prevalent in Photon Hypernova. Because Kashtira runs this card, and there are dozens upon dozens of decks that could be succeeding right now in the meta if Dimension Shifter wasn't something that existed. I truly think that Danger Dark World, despite Droll, Danger Dark World could be very successful if Dimension Shifter didn't exist in the meta. I don't think by any means it would be the top contending deck, but it would definitely be better than a Rogue, probably like Tier 2, especially with Dark Corridor. Or even, I guess, Tier 3 or Tier 2, realistically. And Danger Dark World's just one off the top of my head, because that is a deck that dies if their stuff can't hit the graveyard. But there's plenty of other examples. It's just Dimension Shifter is defining the current meta. The decks that are succeeding right now are decks that can play it or play through it. Proof being is that Pearly, very few of the cards they actually need hit the graveyard. Kashtira, they love getting banished. Branded, they can play through it. It's a bit of a struggle depending on the hand, but they can play through it for sure. D-Link, they don't particularly need their graveyard. Some of the stuff that some things they want to hit the graveyard, like Collapse Serpent, for sure, but it's not a necessity. Not to mention they do banish their own stuff to begin with. It just, again, like the meta is currently being defined by who can play through Dimension Shifter or play it. The decks that can currently play it and like just not really give a shit are like Exo Sisters, Kashtira, Vanquished Soul, Fluandereeze, and just a handful of others that just realistically are very successful in the current meta. Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, no, it's the biggest reason that I think Dimension Shifter needs to be banned, is because it single-handedly is defining what decks are good and what decks are not. And I don't think a single card should have that much power. So, yeah, I don't think a singular card should have that much power. Now, if a deck is shutting out plenty of other decks, that's a whole nother story, because that deck is a deck. It's a conglomerate of multiple cards that make it good and better than other decks and makes it the reason that certain decks don't succeed. But if a singular card is doing that, that's completely different. And Kashtira can succeed completely on its own without Dimension Shifter. Vanquished Soul can succeed on its own without Dimension Shifter. Exo Sisters can succeed on its own without Dimension Shifter. It's just Dimension Shifter gives so much shutout potential to other decks that normally would be able to beat those decks. Especially since Arise Heart already exists in Kashtira, and I know I'm using Kashtira as an example. I don't think Kashtira is really a problem deck anymore. It's still one of the best decks, and it's a really strong deck, but I don't think the deck itself is a problem. I just think some of the things it runs is a problem, Prosperity and Dimension Shifter being two examples. But Kashtira is just a big example. Kashtira doesn't need Dimension Shifter is the problem. They have Arise Heart, which is just like an onboard Dimension Shifter. The problem is that they don't have to, they're not forced into using that as an asset if they don't want to, because they can just activate Dimension Shifter. Even if they go second, they could just go turn 1, Dimension Shifter, and say fuck you to your opponent. And again, this card wouldn't be such a problem if for two things. It only lasted the turn it was activated, and it couldn't be like activated turn 1 from the hand. The fact that this card can be activated from the hand, and it's basically a hand trap. The fact that it can be activated from the hand immediately means there's very little interaction, and it can be activated on either turn in the draw phase, meaning that your opponent can't even set up a board before you decide to try and do this, to try and negate it. So just instantly, you have to like, there's a little bit more interaction. If you're for some reason playing a fairy deck that runs Herald of Orange Light, you can still activate Orange Light to negate it. But you have to rely off of what's in your hand if your opponent activates this, because they're going to activate it the moment they see it. Whether they're going first or second, they're going to activate it, because the immediate restriction is you can't have cards in your graveyard. So again, that's just my reason for why I think Dimension Shifter needs to get banned. Like I said, realistically, if we see it on the list, we might see it have like the OCG treatment where it's at 2. I just don't think personally 2 is enough, because 2 means you're still going to see it, not as consistently without that third copy, but you are still going to see it. And 1, I just think this card is very problematic. And, you know, one could argue like, oh, well, it's just a bad design card. Yes, it is. It very much is. And, you know, obviously you can't make the argument that every bad design card needs to get banned, because that's just, unfortunately, not true and not the case. Konami just keeps pumping these bad design cards out one after the other every single set. But there are ways to manage what bad design cards are a problem, what ones aren't, and that is the ban list, unfortunately. And so, yeah, that's just my personal opinion. And I'm speaking from many people's perspectives here. I know a lot of people that just don't like Dimension Shifter. Even some of them even run it. They just think it's just a card that does too much for so little. Yeah, I think this card is too oppressive, and it just is. It's single-handedly defining what decks are good and what decks aren't, because if you take again, I'm using Danger Dark World as an example here because it just dies to Dimension Shifter. If you take Danger Dark World to a regional, you best expect to lose to Dimension Shifter because you're going to see it one way or another, especially since Gasteria is still very much in the format. You're going to see it. So it's just the fact that the decks right now are being defined by who can play through Dimension Shifter is, I just think, a problem. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And also don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. We are only like 4 or 5 subscribers away from 1,500, which is crazy to me. And the videos lately have been doing very well. So I do want to thank you all for that. I know you all haven't, I know some people have voiced this in the comments that, you know, not a big fan of the VTuber or whatever. Unfortunately, this is just, you know, my style of making content. I know the lips don't sync. That is just, you know, my webcam doesn't pick up how quickly my lips are moving. So, you know, for that, I'm sorry, but, you know, just deal with it. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. See ya!